Now then, everyone, welcome to the 6th episode of Highlander, the show where we talk about every single legendary card in Hearthstone. I'm joined, as always, by my good friend and co-host, Jamie. How are you doing, Jamie?
Hi, everybody. Not too bad, thanks, mate.
I'm James, telling you to sit back and relax as we talk about some more cards. If this is your first time listening, this is the first episode we are recording after the Classic set. All the expansions from now on are ones that are going to be rotated in and out of Wild and Standard and such like. And this episode is Naxx, Hearthstone's very first expansion. Just before we start talking about specific cards, Jamie, how do you feel about Naxx in general? If someone says Naxx to you, what's your first gut reaction?
I mean, it's one of the most sort of iconic sets.
Yeah.
Changed a lot about the game, really. And when you look at the power level, even now, even in Wild, the cards still see a lot of play, which for the first expansion, pretty impressive, really.
Naxx introduced 30 cards. Quite a lot of these, like you say, they still see play in Wild, all these years later, with everything we've said about an emphasis on synergy and, having to do really broken stuff to actually make it. A lot of them still see play. I think one that really leaps out to me is Mad Scientist. It's just an incredibly powerful, silly card that somehow never got nerfed, but here we are. Other cards that are really powerful and still see some play include Deathlord, Nerubian Egg from time to time, Echoing Ooze as well.
Oh, Echoing Ooze, yeah, it's a prime example. And then there's some of the class cards as well. So we've got, Voidcaller. Oh boy. Scourge of the Wild format for years now.
How on earth has that card not been nerfed?
Unbelievable.
Right, our first card is Maexxna, 6 mana, 2/8, Poisonous Beast. If you go on Hearthstone and you filter by decks that have included Maexxna, and you look at the top lists, there is one on the day of Naxx's release and someone hitting Legend with a list with Maexxna in it. Maexxna just happened to be in the deck because it was a new card. But the second list is literally entitled Most Useless Deck Ever.
Oh, okay. It's one of those again, is it?
Yeah.
We're back to this.
Yeah, I'm afraid so. It's just one of those. What do you think about Maexxna, Jamie?
The thing with Adventures, obviously, is that you're guaranteed to get all of the legendaries from them. And I don't have Maexxna because I disenchanted it because it's too boring to have in the collection.
Yeah.
That was a bit ago when I actually needed the dust to craft something. But I don't really feel the need to recraft it. It's a Battlegrounds card. It's very rare that poisonous cards actually ever see play anyway. But poisonous cards that have been things like Plague Scientist, which are 3 mana battle cry, give a minion poisonous, and that's obviously much better than this. A much better card than this is the 2 mana 2/1 that can't be targeted by spells or hero powers. Evasive Chimera, that's what it is. It's also a beast, that's poisonous, and that sees no play.
I was looking for a lot of the streamers' reactions to these cards when they were first unveiled, and no one thought this card was going to be good. History has shown that it's only gotten worse somehow.
What I have got to say is that I'm on the Gamepedia again. We've got some decent bit of stuff on Maexxna. So, with a large health pool and the devastating poisonous effect, Maexxna can destroy minion after minion if left unattended to. She has especially powerful synergy. Powerful synergy with several classes. Maexxna's Beast attribute pairs well with the Hunter's class cards. Houndmaster can make her a formidable defense with taunt, and a preemptive Tundra Rhino can let her surprise opponents. Alright then. Also, this is my favourite. Bestial Wrath can allow her to kill off high attack minions without dying herself. I'll tell you what, I'm going to have to build a deck around Tundra Rhino living a turn into Maexxna Bestial Wrath. That sounds like a combo, that does. Quest Mage eat your heart out, eh? Blimey.
You can kind of see what they were going for, can't you? Because it's it doesn't need all this pure strength and its attack. It's got this weird poisonous effect. And I kind of get what they were going for. But I feel this kind of design just can't work, especially in Hearthstone, because of the fact that if you're trying to trade up into something else, first your opponent either has to play their big thing, so you know to play Maexxna. So they're just going to swing with their big thing, do what they want to do with it, or whatever. Or you play Maexxna on 6 before they play anything big that's going to actually trade into. But then they can put a taunt up, they can just kill it, they can deal with it pretty easily. If said big minion has Divine Shield, you're kind of out of luck. If it's got stealth, you're kind of out of luck. And also, you've just got to ask yourself, well, why wouldn't I just run like single target removal?
There's another problem as well, is that it costs 6 mana. The 6 mana do nothing again, and it's kind of 8 health isn't enough on 6 to make it actually sticky enough to see play. Like, Maexxna's at her best when you play her while you're ahead, but then you're going to have to trade with her to get value, and you don't want to trade with her because it's turn 6 and you're ahead, so you want to go face. And attacking for 2 to hit face, it's not really, you're not doing a lot.
I think this is a case of flavour taking ultimate precedent over actual game design. Because, like we say, like, this card was never going to see play. Like, Assassinate is better than this, and that never sees play, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of the thing that you have to compare it to.
Yeah, I think the frustrating thing as well is that it's not like there's any sort of interesting stuff you can do with it either. It's not like a bad card, but that you can do some mean combo or something cool with. Like Lorewalker Cho, right? At least Lorewalker Cho you can do some weird stuff with. But Maexxna's just nothing, really.
Unlike all of the other legendaries in this set, it's just a bit of a waste of space. Like, it doesn't really serve a purpose. It never has, and it probably never will. I mean, I would say, how do you actually fix Maexxna? But the thing is, there are actually half-decent poison minions already that exist.
I'm just looking through all the poison minions, and the couple that stand out are Venomizer, the 2/2 mech magnetic. And that's good because it's like a pseudo charge. Gives poison to something that's already on the board, and that's very good. And then Primordial Explorer is a staple in Standard. It's cards that have already decent effect or like on in themselves. Like I said, the magnetic one, you're already getting +2/+2. It's magnetic, so it benefits from the mech synergy. That's the level you need to actually be at to see play in Constructed. Because as I say, Amazing Chimera doesn't see any play, and that's a pretty decent card.
So the next card is Loatheb. 5 mana, 5/5, Battle Cry. Enemy spells cost 5 more next turn.
Well, I think it's a real contender for the best card in the game. If you look at the history of the kind of what's seen play, there's few cards that have seen as much consistent play as Loatheb.
Certainly, yeah.
He's one of those where if you've got a card slot free in Wild, you just put him in.
Yeah.
There's obviously some decks that he's like any sort of tempo deck he's core in, any odd deck he's core in.
Yep.
Just anything that kind of wants to go fast, really. It's the fact that he's one-sided and he's got decent stats. A 5/5 is aggressive enough to where it threatens, and
you don't mind like the little stat loss just for the fact that shutting your opponent out of the game for a few turns. Spells are kind of the backbone of any sort of defense against aggro, and Loatheb just completely shuts you out. It's like turn 5 Loatheb and you're dead.
An Odd Rogue's a good example. That's probably the deck that uses Loatheb the best, right? It's like it'll slowly build up a board and like build up a big hench clan thug, and you're playing against, say, a priest or something, and they're about to AoE you, and then you just jam Loatheb, and then you can just hit them for an extra like ton of damage, and that'll usually get you over the line.
Yeah. Some control decks run it as like a tech against other control decks or combo decks, and aggro decks obviously want it as a way to shut out those other decks. Like you say, everyone can find a use for Loatheb.
Look at Shadowwalk Shaman. The reason that whole thing in Wild works is that it copies Loatheb enough that all your spells cost like 20 more.
Yeah, exactly.
Unless you kind of have Shadowy Brandwin or some such. You're basically just toast.
The card has been that prevalent that there isn't really one deck that it's core to. Like, almost every deck could run Loatheb and it'd be fine. Something I think might be interesting to say about Loatheb is, what do you think of Loatheb's design? Are you a fan of it, or...?
I like Loatheb. I think it's a good card for the game, because otherwise you kind of... There's a lot of aggro decks that just wouldn't have a chance, but equally, getting Loatheb when you're about to kind of come back is just crushing. I kind of liken it to Reno for the aggro decks, because if you end up drawing and jamming Loatheb on curve when you've built up an advantage, it will often just win the game.
Yeah.
And there's very little your opponent can do to counter it, or nothing, in fact.
That's fair.
I hate Reno as a card. I think it's terrible design. Your question is whether they're well designed. I don't think Loatheb's well designed. I don't think it's a healthy card. But it's kind of necessary because of Reno, and like Reno's necessary because of how fast aggro decks are. So it's all kind of, it all links back to things needing to be around. I don't like it, but you get aggro decks now in Wild that can quite often kill you through Arena.
Yeah.
Odd Rogue's very good at killing through Arena. That deck's got a lot of sustained damage.
So I don't really like the incredibly swingy nature of it. But on the other hand, you don't necessarily die with Loatheb because there is counterplay to it. Like you can include taunts or you can include some sort of removal that isn't spell-based in some decks. You know, and also to actually take full advantage of Loatheb, you often have to have a board anyway. You know, with Reno Priest, stuff like Spirit Lash and Breath of the Infinite?
Yeah, Breath of the Infinite.
You know, so it's like AoE that you can use before turn 5 or 6. You can use so Loatheb's impact is minuscule. I'm not sure where I'm going with this because it's still an incredibly swingy card.
It's an extremely swingy one-sided effect on a well-started minion, which means that it's not much cost to putting it in the deck, and I don't think that's what you want from cards, really. I like Loatheb a lot, and I don't particularly want it to get changed, unless like there's a big rework of things. It is a bit good, really. I think what happened is that they printed Loatheb and realised, wait a second, this is too good. And then if you look at every other tech card pretty much that's ever been printed, they're all way, way worse than Loatheb.
Yeah.
The only one that's kind of even comparable is Boom Pistol Bully, and that only affects Battle Cries, which is like one sort of specific type of minion, as opposed to an entire half of the cards in your deck, right?
Yeah. I feel the same way as you, that you can't really change Loatheb because of the fact that its effect in the game is healthy in that it counters heavy control decks from being able to steal the game too easily. But at the same time, you keep thinking, well, actually, should those decks be able to do that in the first place? And I'm not sure. I will say one of the best feelings in Hearthstone is that when you've done Loatheb and the opponent plays like a 7 or 8 mana spell, you know, because it's been bumped up by 5, it feels so good.
Oh, yeah. Plays Shadow Word Death for 7 mana and kills your Loatheb.
So normally something that we do is say, what changes could you make to the card to make it more playable? Now, obviously, Loatheb sees a lot of play, and that's perfectly fine. But I think we're both obviously kind of opposed to changing the card to make it fairer, because it's more like a fundamental thing of the game.
The only thing would be knocking its attack down, but that kind of it's pointless, really. It's just the battle cry is so good.
I think you were perfectly right at the start anyway. I think most powerful card in the game is completely right.
I certainly think it's a contender, like legendary-wise, definitely.
It's like a card that was printed in the wrong year. This card should not exist in 2014. It should exist in like 2019 or 2020, you know?
It's weird how at odds it is with Maexxna, right?
Yeah, actually, that's a good point.
There couldn't be any more different. Like, you've got a pile of useless stats that doesn't do anything, and like this, right?
Yeah.
It's bizarre balancing, really is. You talk about powerful cards, things like Doctor Boom, stuff like Ragnaros, right? Most cards like that have had their time in the spotlight and then they've dropped off a bit. Loatheb's never dropped off. There's never been a time, I think, where it hasn't seen play. There's very few cards you can say that about, considering how old it is.
Yeah, it's just sort of immune to it, because it doesn't really matter how much more AoE you give Priest or board clears that you give to Warrior.
Yeah.
Like, the fact is that they're all going to be bumped up by 5 by Loatheb, and that's always going to be good for an aggro deck. Until aggro decks get to a point where they get fast enough that they don't even want Loatheb, and some of them are getting to that point, the card is just going to continue to see play. You know, no question. Baron Rivendare, 4 mana, 1/7. Your death rattles are doubled. This is the very first time that we had an effect like this, because Brand didn't come out till quite a bit later.
Something to mention is that Baron only works on minions, not cards in general, so he doesn't work on weapons.
Baron is a card that's got an extremely powerful effect, and yet has seen play in very few decks.
The problem Baron's got is that he's just too expensive to be versatile enough to actually make work.
Yeah.
It's like 4 mana, but you're just getting to the point where it's hard to actually combo him.
The thing about this card is the fact that, like, a lot of the really powerful death rattles in the game either are on extremely big bodies, so like Scrapyard Colossus, or when they're on really small things, like the eggs, you actually have to find a way to get the eggs to trade into something because they always have 0 attack. So the ideal scenario would be play Baron on 4, trade your death rattles in and get an insane amount of value, but that is really kind of hard to do.
When you're comparing it to Bran, Bran's all about resource generation. So Bran isn't all about generating stuff on the board, but Baron generally is, because death rattles don't generally add things to hand. So he for Baron to be effective, he needs to be in a board-based deck. But then playing a 4-mana card on a board-based deck and then comboing off, it makes it just quite difficult.
The one deck that I can think of that I've played him in was Big Rogue before other cards got printed for it, because that's a deck that always revolves around triggering death rattles with stuff like Necrean Blade and, cycling through Kobold Illusionist and Silver Vanguard and all these powerful death rattles. But he was never that good because he was just kind of clunky.
You did used to run it in Egg Hunter, and it was quite good in that.
Oh, yes.
I say quite good. It was actually very good in that. But then that leads me on to the other problem with the card, is its stat line.
Yeah.
So 7 health's nice, but 1 attack. So Hunter got a card printed in Boomsday that was originally a 5-mana 3/6 with the Baron Death Rattles trigger twice effect. Now, funnily enough, Necromechanic does work on weapons, but that's by the by, really. Necromechanic ended up getting buffed to a 4-mana 3/6 Death Rattles trigger twice, which is 1 less health but 2 more attacks than Baron for the same effect, which is better.
Certainly. Like you say, the thing about it is that even though it's got the 1 extra health, it's so easy for your opponent to either trade into compared to Necromechanic. So that's kind of the situation the card is in and has been in for the past year or so.
I don't think it's seen a lot of play for a while, to be honest with you.
One deck that sort of maybe could have used it was... Are you aware of the deck Raptor Rogue?
Of course, yeah.
This was a deck that came around League of Explorers. So this is Rogue abusing the... What's this? Unearth Raptor, that's it.
Unearth Raptor, yeah.
Yeah, the 3-mana 3/4, Battle Cry, copy friendly minions, Death Rattle. An incredibly cool card, really enjoy it. Goes well with eggs, all this sort of carry on. Now, you'd think that would be ideal to use with Baron, because you can play Raptor on 3, and then play Baron on 4, trade the Raptor in, get some crazy value or something like that. But the problem is that there are just better 4-drops to run that aren't as clunky or easy to trade into, like Piloted Shredder, for example.
It's a weird one, really. It's a good Battlegrounds card again.
Yeah, it's funny, actually.
Which is what most people will probably think of it as well.
That's the theme of this episode, isn't it? It's just...
Yeah, well, I mean, Baron is a prime example. Also, one last note, something in the strategy section.
Oh, there we go.
Apparently, with 7 health and 1 attack, Rivendare is also a valuable target for Divine Spirit and Inner Fire, and can pull off unexpected wins because of the opponent's reluctance to clear Rivendare off the board when its effect cannot take significant impact. Now, the opponent's reluctance to clear Rivendare off the board. Now, stop there. Rivendare is one of the biggest soft taunts in the game. If you see Rivendare, you're like, well, that's got to be in the deck to do something weird. Let me get rid of it immediately.
I don't know, lad.
I think that's a reasonable note to end the discussion with Baron on, because I don't think there's much more to say about it, really.
We're going to cover both of these cards together for obvious reasons. So, Stalagg, which is a 7-mana... Feugan, 5-mana, 4/7, Death Rattle. If Stalagg also died this game, summon Thaddeus. And then we've got Stalagg, 5-mana, 7/4, Death Rattle. If Feugan also died this game, summon Thaddeus. Now, just to be clear, Thaddeus is a 10-mana, 11/11. Something about these cards you should probably all know is that I absolutely love these two. I think they're some of the most interesting, cool, and obviously very gimmicky cards in Hearthstone, and I just love them. It's so rare that you get cards that specifically name another card that they obviously really stand out. The only ones that really come close are like the Cthulhu and Galakron mechanics.
Yeah, there's not archetypes like Yu-Gi-Oh! It's all about just cards, really, a lot of the time.
As I say, I really like these two. Now, having said all that, they haven't seen a great deal of competitive play.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder why, really.
Well, I think the first thing to say about these is that one of them is quite clearly better than the other one. Feugan has always been regarded as better than Stalagg because his stat line is just so much better. It's like Stalagg can just die to an Eviscerate, or he can be traded into extremely easily. He's kind of got the same problem that Core Hound has, where that low health means that smaller things can just trade into him super easily to the point where it's not very impactful on the board. And you find the same thing with Stalagg. But Feugan, on the other hand, has actually got a really good stat line. You're often playing these cards in a control deck or a slow mid-range deck anyway, so the ability to trade down into stuff is actually quite useful. So that means that Feugan is actually fairly decent. I mean, one of the other cards in this set is actually Spectral Knight.
Yeah.
Now, that card is a 5-mana 4/6, can't be targeted by spells and hero powers. Now, if you consider that Feugan has actually got one more health point on that, and doesn't have the can't be targeted by spells and hero powers thing. And Spectral Knight did see a fair bit of competitive play.
I'm going to say Spectral Knight was fairly popular for a bit.
Yeah. Something interesting about these cards is that certain classes are better at abusing these death rattle effects than others. And Hunter is the prime example of that.
Extremely powerful death rattle synergy cards, yeah.
Exactly. So, Play Dead, Feign Death, and 9 Lives are all very good cards. And all of them can be used to keep summoning Thaddeus's.
Stitch Tracker is also a good card in Reno Hunter, and that you can pick up an extra copy of either of them if you need them.
Yeah. Well, that's quite good.
Well,
the thing about it is the fact that they're incredibly greedy, and even if you think of it as like 10 mana, 22, split across 3 bodies, that's all well and good, but the fact is it's so conditional, and they're actually so slow, that it's really hard to pull off. You have to somehow draw both of them, play both of them, and they both have to die. And then Thaddeus has to not get assassinated, or light bombed, or siphon souled, or something, along those lines. It has to not instantly die. And that's where our problem lies.
At the risk of repeating myself, they don't do anything when you play them on the board. They're just some stats. And then, God forbid you're playing against a Shaman, or a Mage, or someone playing Tankmaster Overspark with attack.
One of the things about these cards is the fact that if you transform one of these cards, then Thaddeus can't get summoned. Nothing technically died. It just got transformed into something else, which is a bit of a problem.
I've only played against one person using these things, I'd say in the past year or two, I think. It was a rogue doing stuff with Togwaggle Scheme to shovel us off and doing that sort of thing. I was playing Shaman and I devolved his Stalagg and he died.
You monster.
As I say, sorry, James. I know that thing is immense sadness.
It really does. I just really like these cards. I love the flavour as well. I just think it's so cool.
No, yeah, it is cool. But I've never really played much with them myself, but I appreciate that they're pretty neat.
These two have actually seen some play in the past. If you look at Reno Lock around League of Explorers, well, in fact, the very first Reno Lock, because it's League of Explorers, just before the rotation into Wild, a few people were experimenting with it in there, because obviously when you're building a Highlander deck, you've got to pick less good cards, shall we say.
Not as big a card pool.
Yeah, that's a better way of saying it. So some people ran Stalagg and Feugan as like a value bomb. You could be pretty assured that Warlock is going to draw through a lot of the deck because of the hero power, and the game's gone quite long in handlock, so it's actually quite a decent value bomb later on in the game. A big threat for your opponent to prepare for, instead of something like Ysera or Jaraxxus or something like that. There's something interesting that people have done with it. I think in about 2018, I think Get Me Off got top 100 Wild Legend using Reno Hunter, and he was playing these two in that deck, because as I've said, Hunters have found a way to abuse these cards quite a fair bit, but in general, that's pretty much the extent of the competitive play that they've seen. They're just kind of meme cards, and I think that's perfectly fine, They're just fun.
Yeah.
One other thing that you can do with them is that you can use Flax, Boom, Zuka to summon them out of the deck, kill them both at the same time, and summon 2 Thaddeus's.
Well, that's pretty good.
I know Dewin got it to Legend a couple of months ago, but he had the 11-star bonus.
Yeah, but I mean, that helps.
He said it was entirely down to the bonus. I think he had a less than 50% win rate, but...
Oh, nice.
The fact that Dane has played a lot of that Roll the Bones rogue with Anchor and abusing all of that stuff, and even he's not running Stalagg and Feugan, makes the situation of putting them in a deck a bit scary and daunting. But anyway, not exactly competitively viable cards. Thumbs up from me.
Yeah, not bad.
Kel'Thuzad, 8 mana, 6/8. At the end of each turn, summon all friendly minions that die at this turn. I'll tell you what, We couldn't have picked a better time to talk about Kel'Thuzad, could we?
No, we couldn't. Well, he's just had a retrain.
Exactly. I think I'm going to let you talk about this one a bit, Jeremy.
No, it's my favourite card in the game, mate. I'm not entirely sure why I like it so much. It's just kind of all around. I just think it's a really sort of cool effect. I like its design. I like the voice.
It's not something to do with WoW, is it? Because I don't think you.
No. I just like I like his voice line, and I think he's really good in the Naxx adventure.
Yeah.
And in particular, I just think the card itself is super cool.
Yeah.
Because there's very little else that's comparable to it in terms of how much you need to kill a card.
Yeah. I tell you what, I've got a memory of you playing this card against me. And this was just when I was getting back into the game. And I can remember you playing against me with Reincarnate Shaman and just summoning loads and loads of Kel'Thuzads. And I just could not believe what was happening. I thought, what on earth is this? Because I'd never seen the card before, because no one had ever played it against me. I just thought, what? This is so unfair. I just thought, what's this broken, overpowered rubbish? That stands out to me as I need to get back into Hearthstone.
Yeah. So the thing with Kel'Thuzad is that he's not actually seen that much. He's seen a bit of play, but the main deck, as you say, is in Reincarnate Shaman. That at some point, not too long ago, but not sort of really recent, was the best deck in Wild. It was quite a while ago, but Kel'Thuzad was kind of like the big kind of fancy win condition. The main use is in Shaman, and then he's very, very good in Big Rogue as well.
Oh, yeah. I keep thinking, you could probably replace Kel'Thuzad in that deck with just the 8 mana 8/8 from Witchwood. The Death Rattle restore 8 health to your hero.
The ranged duck, yeah.
But then, why don't you just play more into the high roll and do all the Kel'Thuzad stuff as well? Because that, oh my goodness gracious me, that's so fun.
Well, there's no better feeling than your opponent AoE and you're killing your Silver Vanguard and it pulling Kel'Thuzad and getting everything back.
Exactly.
Or God forbid, you get 2 off of Kobold Illusionist and then they resurrect them all back.
Yeah, that's quite a good one.
One of the things I love about the card so much is that it works on both turns.
Yes.
So, your opponent has to kill it properly. There's no point in them trading everything in.
Because it'll just get resummoned, yeah.
So, Kel'Thuzad plus a taunt against a board-based deck, and, it's pretty much game over a lot of the time.
Also, 8 health is, nothing to sniff at. If you think of it as, an 8 mana 6/8 taunt,
yeah,
that's probably the best way to think about it, and that's not too bad.
It's not bad, yeah.
I think the most recent deck that it's been used in competitively would be Darkest Hour Warlock. Now, I absolutely hated playing against Kel'Thuzad in that deck because, like you say, the fact that it operates on both turns, which means that if they pull their combo off, summon a bunch of stuff, it's it doesn't matter. Kel'Thuzad just beats you.
Yeah.
Hands down. What are you even going to do?
Yeah, because you have to AoE and kill KT.
Yes.
With it having 8 health, that can sometimes be more difficult than it sounds, right?
And let me tell you, as someone who loves Control Warrior, the very worst thing that can possibly happen is Brawl and KT lives.
Oh, Brawl, okay.
The reason I bring up Darkest Hour Warlock is because of the fact that, like we've said about Ragnaros previously, KT is one of those minions where it doesn't really see play anymore unless you can find a way to cheat it out.
Yeah.
For a long time, he was also running Big Shaman because that's kind of what Reincarnate Shaman morphed into. Now, you've played a lot of Big Shaman.
I have.
Do you play KT?
No, but I probably am going to soon. Plenty of people do play him even now.
Yeah.
Frankly, now that I'm a legend, I'll probably just put him in because if I play Big Shaman again, it's fun, isn't it?
Well, exactly. I mean,
any excuse to shoehorn KT into a deck, I'm going to take it, right?
I mean, that's the deck for him, and it's he's not even he's actually kind of good in that. I know a lot of people don't run him because of the fact that if you get him off of Muck Morpher, it's just he's not affecting the board, but at the same time, that Reincarnate high roll is just too good.
Yeah,
it's too good not to take.
Yeah.
When you said about it's seen some play, one of the times that it's actually seen a fair bit of play is actually when Dr. Boom was released.
Yeah.
Now, one of the advantages of Kel'Thuzad is the fact that it doesn't have 7 attack, so it can't be killed by Big Game Hunter. So you actually see a fair amount of control lists around this time actually running Kel'Thuzad as the 8 drop in the deck rather than something like Ragnaros because it can't be killed that easily. So if you're in a handlock, you trade you can easily trade some stuff in, play Kel'Thuzad, or you can just drop Kel'Thuzad on 8. It was just good. The other card that's kind of like that is Sneed's Old Shredder. So these are both quite slow cards, obviously, but they sort of get away with it because of the time when they were released. This kind of decks that they go into and that sort of thing. And it's just all about the value. We saw play like that for quite a while. Had a niche, yeah. Have you used him in many other decks?
Here and there. Like I said, I'll just shoehorn him into a deck for some reason at some point. Like if I just fancy playing the card, I'll just put it in a deck.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
But it's generally not particularly helpful. The other thing I was going to say is that he's one of the stalwarts of heroic adventures.
Oh, right, okay.
Like, there's loads of stuff that you can use him to beat. Because the AI is stupid.
Is there some way to beat the Lich King with him?
That's how I did it, right?
Right, okay.
And you get Public Defender on, right? And then you get Kel'Thuzad, and then he just keeps attacking the minion with the weapon. And then you play Scaled Nightmare, and then you just wait for Scaled Nightmare to turn into like 2,000 attack, and then you pop his weapon and then just attack him for 2,000. Kel'Thuzad and a taunt, right? That's kind of a thing that the AI doesn't appreciate desperately. Honestly, I'm just biased. Like you said, there's something about Katie that I really like. I'm not going to try and justify that the card's sort of super amazing. It's not as good as I wish it was, but like, you know, can't complain. Like at least it sees a bit of play. That's what I'm happy with. At least you can play it and kind of get away with it.
It's funny how this sees more play than Ragnaros at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. I'm glad it's got a home in some variants of Big Shaman. And if anything like Darkest Hour Warlock comes out ever again, God forbid, then it might have a place in there as well.
That's one of my proudest predictions, you know.
What's that?
Blood Bloom.
Oh.
I said on day one, as soon as that was released, that's going to be broken at some point and cause trouble.
Yeah. It's mana cheat, isn't it?
I knew it all along. I've got one thing left, and it's a good one. We've got to end with a bang. So we're back on the Gamepedia, and we're back on the strategy section. So
okay.
there's some of the KT stuff is reasonable. It's talking about like the reincarnate stuff.
Yeah.
Or that you can like copy it and blah blah blah. Your opponent has to kill all of them at once. Blah 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 blah. But listen to this. One use of this card is to combo it with a Doomsayer played the previous turn. Since Doomsayer triggers at the start of the controlling player's turn, Kel'Thuzad can be played after the Doomsayer's effect has taken place, resummoning any friendly minions destroyed that turn along with the Doomsayer itself. Be aware, though, that the Doomsayer will be more than happy to destroy all minions once again at the start of the next turn. Now, I think that might be the best combo I've ever heard. I think that might just win you the game on the spot. Doomsayer into KT, resurrect Doomsayer, and then blow it up again.
Dear me.
I mean, just unreal.
That's one of the best ones you found yet. That's fantastic.
Also, okay, so I've just realised that the next paragraph, like, however, running Doomsayer in a deck simply for the combo is the combo now, apparently. Is not a good idea since it can be killed without damaging your opponent's minions and will not be good as a standalone minion. What are you on about?
Yeah, who'd run Doomsayer, right? Terrible cat.
But the combo, though, James, the combo.
The combo.
I'm going to have to make a deck around the combo.
The combo.
It's just going to be called the combo. It's Doomsayer into Kel'Thuzad. It's genius. What does it suggest you actually do with this? Oh, apparently you're supposed to play it in a mill deck with dancing swords and Baron Rivendare. Brilliant. Inspired deck building, that is.
I've just thought of the ultimate counter to this, right? So if your opponent is a hunter, what they could do is they could play Scarlet Webweaver, right? And when all of your stuff resurrects, what they're going to do is they're going to play Tundra Rhino, Maexxna, and they'll kill your KT.
Oh no, it's the answer to the combo. The other combo, the super combo.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you what, everybody, you're welcome because we found the two best combo decks in the format.
Oh dear.
Bestial Wrath Maexxna and Doomsayer Kel'Thuzad. Fantastic.
On that bombshell, I think it's time to end. Thank you so much for listening, everybody, and stay safe out there.
Yeah. Thanks for listening, everybody. See you next time. Tell you what, mate, you're going to get copyright strike from Top Gear for that ending, mate.